This story is quietly devastating to the point it lingers in your chest, set against howling wind, drifting snow, and a single light burning in the dark. It's where two broken lives collide at the edge of survival, far from the mercy of town or law. It begins with a knock on a cabin door, something small, desperate, and nearly missed, yet powerful enough to change two lives forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You ever notice how cold can go past pain, past feeling, until it turns into a hollow silence inside your bones? That was the cold that took me the night I should have vanished for good. A Wyoming blizzard. I was 18, barely standing, drifting through snow that wanted to finish what it started 2 winters earlier. The storm had already claimed them: Owen Drayton, Lenora Drayton, and little May. It left me with a frayed coat, shaking hands, and a hunger sharper than the wind cutting my face. I don't remember how long I walked before I saw it. A cabin. One lamp burning behind a window, its glow bleeding into the storm, like mercy meant for someone else. I don't recall feeling my fists when I knocked, just the sound of wood under skin that had gone numb. Then the door opened. Maeve Hollis, 40 years old, nearly twice my age. Auburn hair threaded with silver eyes worn thin by loss, yet still lit by something unbroken. She took one look at me and pulled me inside without a question. Her fingers brushed my arm as she shut the door, and even through all that cold, something stirred in me that had nothing to do with warmth. Maybe I should have kept walking. Maybe letting the snow take me would have been easier. But I didn't. She set me by the hearth, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders with hands shaped by work, calloused palms, dirt beneath the nails. Hands that had built a life, buried it, and kept moving anyway. She ladled broth into a chipped bowl and placed it in my shaking grip. "Ma'am," I said, my voice raw from too many silent days. "I don't have words for this." "Then don't waste breath on them," she replied, turning back to the fire. Her cotton dress faded patched more times than I could count, caught the glow of the flames. I noticed the curve of her waist, the steady shift of her hips as she stirred the pot. 30 seconds in her cabin, and I was already seeing things I had no right to see. She noticed my glance, said nothing, just handed me the bowl. When our fingers touched, the spark came again. Sharp, immediate. Her breath hitched for the briefest moment before she pulled her hand away, color rising in her cheeks. I stayed. One night turned into a week into a month. She never asked me to leave. I never offered. The Ashford Ridge townsfolk had plenty to say about Maeve Hollis. They called her strange for her herb garden, whispered about her empty womb, her dead husband Caleb Hollis, and the way she lived alone, beyond the reach of proper eyes. They didn't know her. They didn't hear her hum old songs while hanging laundry. Didn't know the sound of her laugh when I told stories from the trail. Didn't see the way her gaze softened when she watched me mend fences or split firewood. And they sure as hell didn't feel the way the air between us hummed tight with something we both pretended not to name. Summer came hard that year, heat shimmering off the field's air thick enough to wade through. I worked her land like it was already mine because somewhere along the way it began to feel that way. She'd sit on the porch, shelling peas or stitching cloth, pretending not to watch. But I knew. I knew her eyes followed the rise and fall of my axe, the way sweat darkened my shirt. One afternoon, we were fixing the horse corral together, sun beating down, grasshoppers rattling in the dry grass. I reached for the hammer the same moment she did. Our hands met on the handle, and neither of us let go. Neither of us released the hammer. Maeve, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. She lifted her eyes to mine, and in that instant I saw everything written there. Desire tangled with fear. Guilt pressed hard against longing. She was wrestling herself in plain sight. A loose strand of hair stuck to her cheek, damp with sweat. I raised my hand slowly, meaning only to brush it aside. She went still. Breath caught. Lips parted. I could have kissed her then. God knows I wanted to. But she stepped back, breaking whatever had gathered between us. "We need to finish the fence," she said. Her voice cut sharp like glass snapping underfoot. That night we sat on the porch beneath a sky so crowded with stars it looked like someone had spilled salt across black cloth. Maeve hummed one of her old songs, soft and steady. I asked her to teach it to me, and she did. Our voices wound together in the dark. Her shoulder rested against mine, solid and warm. When I studied her profile, the firm line of her jaw, the gentle curve of her throat, I felt words pressing at my chest, begging to be said. "Maeve," I whispered. "Don't," she said quietly, but she didn't pull away. "We can't." "Why?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm old enough to be," she stopped herself. "This town already thinks I'm sinful, and you're young and I'm worn down." She forced a small smile. "Used goods handsome?" Handsome. The first time she'd ever called me that. I turned fully toward her. Tears shone in her eyes. "You think I care what they say?" I asked. "You think years matter to me, Maeve? You're the first thing that's felt like home since I lost my family." Her hand slid into mine on the porch rail, fingers threading through mine. We stayed that way until the moon dipped low, saying nothing more. But something had shifted. Something had been spoken that couldn't be taken back. After that, the town began to circle. Preacher Silas Rowe rode out one morning with a small group clutching a notebook like it carried the weight of Scripture. They came armed with questions, with accusations wrapped in righteous words. "This isn't proper, Miss Hollis," the preacher said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "A young man living under your roof. No marriage, no blood relation. Folks are talking." "Let them," Maeve replied, chin lifted, but I saw her hands trembling in her apron. "There are laws," Ransom Pike added smoothly, "about corruption, about older women taking advantage of boys who don't know better." My fists tightened. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Mr. Pike," I said. "I'm here by my own choice." "Choice," Elsbeth Pike muttered, scratching notes into her book. "The devil calls it choice." They laughed, but the poison lingered. That night, a storm rolled in, the kind that rattles walls and reminds you how small a place can be. Maeve and I crouched together beneath a leak in the roof, patching it as rain hammered down. The lamp flickered, throwing restless shadows across her face. Her dress clung to her from the rain slipping through the cracks. When she reached overhead, I steadied her. My hand landed at her waist. She looked down at me, water dripping from her hair, and something inside both of us gave way. "Maeve," I breathed, pulling her close. "We shouldn't. I don't care." Our mouths met. I'd been in fights, I'd ridden through storms, I'd nearly starved to death, but nothing hit me the way that kiss did. It was deep and desperate, her hands fisted in my shirt, drawing me closer. My fingers tangled in her wet hair as the world outside disappeared. She tasted of rain, and of all the years she'd spent alone, carrying more than she ever spoke aloud. When we finally pulled apart, breath ragged between us, she rested her forehead against mine. "I'm not worthy of this," she whispered. "Not you." "Not now," I said. "You're everything." I drew her back into my arms before doubt could take hold again. The buttons of her dress slipped loose beneath my clumsy fingers. The fabric parted, revealing skin warmed to a soft glow by the lamplight. Her breath stuttered as I kissed her shoulder, traced my lips along her collarbone, lingered at the hollow of her throat. She held me tighter, her nails pressing through my shirt into my back. When we sank to the floor, the storm outside faded into nothing compared to the one breaking loose between us. Beneath me, her body moved curves and gentleness and strength woven together. Our breaths tangled as we crossed every line we'd been skirting for months. Later, wrapped together on a blanket while rain still fell, she traced the scar along my ribs, the mark of a bad fall, when I was 15. "What have we done?" she murmured. "Lived," I said. "Finally." But I saw the fear in her eyes all the same. I saw her already rebuilding walls I'd only just pulled down. That was when they came for her land. That was the truth of it. Ransom Pike never cared about morality. Word had spread of a possible silver vein running beneath Maeve Hollis's property. Mostly rumor, but rumor was enough for him. He'd been buying up claims foreclosing on the desperate, stacking his small empire piece by piece. Maeve's land was the final piece, and he couldn't take it outright, so he built a case. Elspeth Pike's notebook became his weapon. Every time I split wood without a shirt, every evening Maeve and I sat close on the porch, every quiet moment of tenderness twisted into something foul on the page. They meant to have her declared unfit, unstable, locked away in an asylum. As for me, they'd call me her victim if that helped, or her accomplice if it suited them better. One gray morning, Elspeth came to us. Her face was pale as milk, the notebook shaking in her hands. "I can't do it," she said, her voice barely there. "I can't be part of this anymore. She told us everything. Ransom's plan. The witnesses he'd paid for. The judge already in his pocket." She stood in Maeve's kitchen, the same woman who had spent months recording our supposed sins, and she broke down. "I watched you," she said through tears. "I wrote it all down and called it wicked. But my marriage is the wicked thing." She swallowed hard. "Ransom hasn't touched me in 2 years. He hasn't looked at me the way you look at her." She turned toward me. "You love her. Truly. And I wanted to punish you for having what I don't." Maeve took the notebook, its pages thick with stolen moments, and held it like the weapon it was meant to be. "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight," Maeve said. "And we do it by the law." There was only one man who could marry us quickly, no questions asked. Jonah Fenn. A retired preacher living up in the hills nearly 20 miles north. Jonah Fenn had known Maeve's late husband, Caleb Hollis, owed him a debt from years back. If we could reach him and be married the right way, it would cut the legs clean out from under Ransom Pike's scheme. We rode out at first light. Maeve on her mare, me astride a borrowed gelding. The trail twisted through pine forest, heavy with the scent of sap and cold, half Christmas, half warning. About midway up the ridge, we heard it. A wolf's howl, close, hungry. Maeve's mare shied hard, nearly throwing her. I lunged for the reins, steadied the horse, and spotted the wolf standing on a rocky rise. Big gray brute, ribs showing, starved the same way we'd been, just longer. "Easy," I murmured, whether to the horse, the wolf, or my own hammering heart, I couldn't say. The wolf watched us a long moment, yellow eyes fixed and weighing. Then it turned and loped back into the trees. Sometimes you get spared. Sometimes danger decides you're not worth the effort. Jonah Fenn's cabin was smaller than Maeve's, crouched against the hillside, like it had grown there. Books were stacked everywhere, the air thick with pipe smoke and old paper. His hands trembled as he opened his Bible arthritis, making every movement slow and deliberate. "You certain about this, Maeve?" he asked. "The town won't take kindly. The town hasn't taken kindly to me in 10 years, she said. I'm done caring." Jonah's gaze shifted to me. "And you, boy." His eyes had seen too many fools make the same mistakes. "You know what you're stepping into?" "I know I love her," I said. He studied me a moment longer. "That'll have to be enough." He married us there, sunlight slanting through grimy windows. Words older than the land itself bound us together. When he told me to kiss my bride, I cupped Maeve's face and kissed her slow and deep-tasting salt from her tears. "You're mine now," I whispered. "I was yours the night you knocked on my door," she said. They were waiting when we rode back. Ransom Pike, Preacher Silas Rowe, a dozen Ashford Ridge townsfolk standing in our yard like they owned the ground beneath their boots. Ransom's face twisted when he saw us riding in together. "Well," he drawled, "took yourselves a little trip, did you?" Maeve swung down, handed me the reins, and walked straight toward him. She pulled the marriage certificate from her saddlebag and shoved it into his chest. "We're married, Ransom. Legal and binding. Witnessed by Jonah Fenn. Registered and sealed," she went on. "Which makes this land my husband's as much as mine. If you've got business here, you deal with both of us," the crowd murmured. Ransom's face flushed red, then drained pale. "This is a farce," he snapped. "You corrupted this boy, turned him into—" "I'm a man," I said, stepping beside Maeve. "And I chose her. Same as she chose me. You got a problem with that, mister?" Pike Luther Beck, the general store owner, cleared his throat. "Ransom," he said slowly. "Seems to me they done it proper. Don't see how it's any of our business now. There's silver under this land," Ransom shouted, losing his grip. "Everyone knows it. She's sitting on a fortune." "Is she?" Luther asked. He pulled a paper from his pocket. "Because I had the territorial surveyor take a look at the geological reports." He tapped the page. "There isn't any silver here, Ransom." "Never was," Luther Beck said evenly. "Just a rumor you decided to believe because you wanted it to be true." That was when the crowd turned on Ransom Pike. Men who had trusted him, men who'd borrowed from him and believed his promises. They finally saw him plain a greedy man willing to ruin lives for a fortune that never existed. They drifted off one by one, like smoke thinning in the wind. Ransom stood alone in our yard, his little empire collapsing around his boots. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It is," Maeve Hollis said quietly. He rode out after that, and we never saw him again. Later we heard he'd left the territory chasing another rumor in another town. 5 years have passed. We're standing now in a garden we built with our own hands. Dirt under our nails. Sun warm across our backs. Maeve's hair has turned silver at the edges, laugh lines settling easy around her eyes. I'm 23, and the Ashford Ridge townsfolk don't whisper anymore. Some even nod when we pass them in town. Elsbeth Pike comes by from time to time, brings her daughter along. She left Ransom a year after Maeve and I were married and started her life over. She sits on our porch, drinks Maeve's herb tea, and smiles more than I ever saw her smile before. One evening, watching the sun sink across the Wyoming plains, Maeve leans into me and asks, "Do you think we did right?" "I think we did what we had to," I tell her. Love was never meant to be clean or simple. But it's real, and real beats proper, she says. She rests her head on my shoulder, and I slip my arm around her waist. Even now, it still makes my heart race. At the edge of our garden stands a sunflower, taller than both of us, its face turned toward the dying light. Maeve planted it the spring after we married. She says it reminds her that beautiful things can grow from scorched earth if you give them time. Sometimes I wonder if a man ever truly knows whether he's living right, whether the choices he makes in the dark will hold up in daylight. I don't have an answer for that. I only know this love found me in a blizzard, pulled me inside, and taught me that the cruelest thing a person can do is deny their own heart what it needs. The town once called us sinners. Maybe we were. But we were alive. Completely alive. And to me, that's worth any price. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.